gather round because I have another spooky story. This story was submitted by someone whose family hosted a foreign exchange student over 20 years ago. Now, while the student was a little bit strange, there was nothing particularly alarming about him at the time. But the information she found out about him years later sent her right down the rabbit hole. Let's get right into the story. My family hosted an exchange student for a year when I was a teenager, a little over 20 years ago now. A few families in our town did it every year, and my parents liked the idea of giving someone a place to stay while they learned English and attended a local high school. His name was Elias, and we were told that he was from Germany. From the beginning, he didn't behave as if he were someone in a new country. He didn't ask questions about food or customs, and he never seemed impressed or overwhelmed by anything. Instead, he moved through our house as if he already knew where things were, opening cabinets without hesitation and navigating the neighborhood without needing directions. His English was also perfect, with no discernible accent. My parents just thought he was confident. I remember noticing it and feeling slightly uncomfortable, though I couldn't have explained why. But what stood out more was how often he seemed confused by things that should have been familiar. He struggled with basic technology in ways that didn't match his age. He stared at the microwave as if he had never seen one before. He flinched when the computer made noise during startup, and once asked me why it needed to, quote, announce itself. I wasn't sure what to make of his quirks, so I assumed the differences were cultural, or that he simply hadn't grown up with the same technology that I had. One night at dinner, my dad mentioned an upcoming election. Elias froze with his fork halfway to his mouth and asked what year it was. It wasn't casual curiosity. There was an urgency in his voice, like he needed to confirm something immediately. When my dad answered, Elias went quiet and didn't speak again for the rest of the meal. Later that night, my parents and I heard him crying softly in the guest room, repeating a phrase under his breath that we couldn't quite make out. We assumed he was just homesick or overwhelmed, so we all made sure to be gentle with him after that. We gave him space and didn't push when he seemed distracted or withdrawn. It wasn't until a few months later, during a completely unrelated incident, that I realized his confusion wasn't limited to people or dates, but it extended to places that should have been universally familiar. That winter, Elias came down with a high fever that wouldn't break. When my parents suggested taking him to the emergency room, he panicked. He asked detailed questions about the hospital before agreeing to go, including the layout, the paperwork process, and what the doctors would be wearing. While we were there, he stared at the staff like he was trying to reconcile what he was seeing. At one point, he leaned towards me and whispered that the doctors were wearing the wrong color scrubs. I assumed he meant that doctors and nurses in Germany just wore different colored scrubs. But I asked him what he meant anyway, and he said, very matter-of-factly, those should have been changed after the accident. I guess I got the timelines wrong. The first time he said something that truly scared me was during a family gathering. My aunt mentioned my cousin's upcoming wedding, and Elias smiled sadly and said, she doesn't marry him during the time I'm from. She never gets the chance. The room went quiet. My aunt brushed it off awkwardly, but Elias looked genuinely confused and concerned, like he didn't understand why we found that strange. There were other moments like that. He asked my mom about a scar on her leg that she'd never mentioned, describing exactly how she got it. He warned my dad not to take a specific route to work one morning, insisting that there would be an accident. My dad ignored him and ended up stuck in traffic for hours after a multi-car pileup closed the road. The conversations Elias and I had were always very strange. I'd find him sitting alone at the kitchen table in the dark, hands folded and staring at nothing. One time I asked him what he was doing, and he told me he was trying to remember his family's faces because they were getting harder to picture. He said his parents had died when he was young and that coming to our home had been a mistake. I asked him to elaborate, and he just looked at me carefully and said, you still have yours here. That's how I know this isn't where I was supposed to end up. After a pause, he added quietly, things aren't lining up the way they said they would. Then he changed the subject, as if he'd already said more than he meant to. The moment that finally broke something open for me came near the end of his stay. We were looking through old photo albums one afternoon when he stopped suddenly at a picture of my grandparents. His hands began to shake and he asked how they were still alive. He described their deaths in detail, down to the weather that day, in an event that, in our world, never happened. When his exchange year ended, he wasn't relieved to go home. He was terrified. On his last night, he told me quietly that when he returned, he wasn't sure where he would end up or if he would exist at all. He said people like him weren't meant to stay once things corrected themselves. After he left, we never heard from him again. The organization who arranged his stay informed us that his family situation had changed and that he would not be maintaining contact. Years later, out of curiosity, I tried to look him up, but there were no records of him beyond that 1 year that he stayed with us. There was one more thing that I didn't discover until much later. About 3 years ago, my mom mailed me a box of old paperwork she'd been cleaning out of storage, including documents from when we hosted Elias. Inside was a copy of his exchange program file, the same one my parents had filled out when he arrived. Most of it was standard, but the emergency contact section caught my attention. The names listed for his parents were unfamiliar, which I expected, but the address wasn't. It was our address, not the one we lived at during his stay, but the house my parents moved into years later, long after Elias was gone. Finding that address on the paperwork puzzled me, so I went looking for an explanation. I started researching exchange programs from the late 90s and early 2000s. That's when I came across a handful of archived articles and references to a short lived government research initiative that explored theoretical time displacement. The details were vague and heavily redacted, but what stood out to me was a repeated reference to third party placement organizations that no longer existed. They were described as nonprofits that matched foreign participants with host families for long term observation, operating quietly and shutting down without explanation. The names of those organizations didn't appear in any modern databases, but one of them exactly matched the letterhead on Elias's exchange file. I don't know what unsettled me more, the idea that the program was real, or the possibility that my family had unknowingly participated in something that we were never supposed to figure out. I submitted my findings to a local news organization in hopes that they would continue researching beyond what I was able to find. Unfortunately, I never heard back from them, and shortly after submitting the story, the links to the articles I saved no longer worked. Okay, so we have to talk about this. Was Elias just a regular foreign exchange student? Or is it possible that he is some sort of time traveler who was placed with this family for some reason that we just can't understand? I'm also curious if any of you have heard of these alleged secret organizations, and if so, leave your thoughts and what you know down in the comments, and be sure to follow for the next spooky story.
Spooky story time. When I was 8 years old, I was taking my dog for a walk through the neighborhood with my mom. It was maybe 11 p.m. We lived next to a swampwoods area on the edge of our neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. I remember it being very silent and silently windy. From down in the swamp, we heard somebody whistling at us. It sounded sort of like a bird, but each whistle was different, enough where the lack of consistency made it human-like. The whistle sounded higher, then lower. I can't really describe it. My mom had a concerned, slightly terrified look on her face and grabbed my hand and said that we should go inside quickly. I didn't understand because I was too young. But seeing my mom freak out made me freak out too. After a while though, I kind of forgot about it. 2 years later, I was taking my dog out again, late at night. There was a large bush that could easily obscure a person behind it, just next to a front door. As I was finishing the walk, the whistling noise started again. Some pitches, some inconsistent human-like tones. As soon as I heard it, a chill went down my spine, as I remembered exactly the feeling of seeing my mom terrified, looking down into the swamp at something I couldn't see. Maybe she couldn't either. I ran inside as fast as possible. Years went by, and I thought about it less and less. I told only a handful of people, and eventually, it slipped from my mind. Fast forward to last summer. I'm 24. Started dating my girl, Sarah. We moved out to South Dakota for work. For Independence Day, we decided to go to the pier. watched the fireworks along the bank of the Missouri River. There was a free camping spot behind a hospital where you could pitch your tent, hang out, and see the fireworks up the river. We were near the end of the campground, and there were very few people around us. As it was getting dark, the fireworks began. They were pretty far away, so the illumination they brought was very little. Thus, we had to sit right at the edge of the river to be able to see them. A huge thunderhead was moving in, and the storm was imminent. So the air seemed electric, and the wind was picking up. The atmosphere was eerie, to say the least. The police boats herded all the other boats off of the river, and had left our area to do the same elsewhere. Most of the other campers walked up the river to have a better view of the fireworks, but Sarah and I stayed behind, and were drinking. Suddenly we heard the sound of a paddle dipping into the river. We saw a figure steering a canoe about 20 meters offshore. Sarah decided to go get more beers from the car, leaving me alone to stare at this mysterious person. And then, of course, they whistled at me. My entire body was frozen and covered in goosebumps. It was the exact same whistler from my childhood, more than a decade earlier. I looked at the figure, but it was much too dark to discern who it could be. They were wearing a hat when they were perpendicular to the shore from me. They stopped paddling, turned the canoe to face directly at me, and it whistled right at me. I was so frightened, I stood up and shouted, "Who are you?" They didn't say anything, just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe 180 degrees, and paddled out of sight. I am a videographer, so I already had my camera by my side. I was taking videos of the fireworks. As the canoe was almost out of sight, I grabbed my camera and got a shot of them, whistling as they went away. When Sarah came back from getting beers, she was very confused as to why I was so freaked out. When I explained, she was also freaked out. I was convinced we would both be murdered that night. How did this whistling person follow me? After 14 years? All the way to South Dakota? Was it a coincidence? Why was it the same whistling noise? Who was that person? And where did they go? So many questions still unanswered. To this day, I'm more afraid of being outside in the dark, where I might hear that whistle again.
Look at all this fog, guys. Perfect for ghost stories. I lived in Leisure City, Florida, which is now considered Homestead, Florida. Whatever. I lived in my grandmother's house. It was me, my dad, my mom, and my brother. My little brother still hadn't been in the picture yet. I think I was about 5, 6 years old, and we would always sense like someone was watching us anytime we were in the living room. And sitting in the living room, there was like this hallway behind us, because the way we were facing, we all faced away from that hallway. And so many times you would hear like a dog running down the hallway, and you'd look and there was nothing there. So after a while, we'd all kind of sense this man who kind of just would stand at the end of the hallway and watch us as we were watching TV. But we all kind of got used to it. We're just like, whatever, this dude's just watching us, you know? He'd walk from one end of the hallway all the way to the front part where you would walk in from the house, and then there's the entire living room. So he'd just stand there leaning on the wall, then turn back around and leave. One day, my dad decides to have a family friend over, and the family friend was all excited because Top Gun had just came out and it is on VHS. That's how old I am. And he was like, yeah, come over. We'll put on the movie, whatever. We'll have a good time. Cool. Everybody's watching the movie. Everybody's doing their normal thing, popcorn, talking, like excitement, right? When the visitor decided to come walking down the hallway and stand there and watch us watch the movie. But my dad never told the man, hey, we have a visitor that's constantly around. So when the guy was watching the movie, and I'm cackling because I just remember this man's face, like, what the fuck? He's like leaning, like he has his arm around the couch and he's like looking, and because he felt something. So he turned his body towards the living room and he sees somebody and he looked over and my dad was like, so you saw him? Like real casual, like. And the guy's like, what the fuck? And he goes, it's okay. He just likes to watch TV, or he's just like paying attention. And my dad's friend was like, nah. What the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, you'll be all right. And he was like, no, what are you talking about? And he's like, he's just watching us watch TV. And the guy was like, absolutely fucking not. So we're all laughing because it was normal to us, and he looked back and he could still see the guy and he was fucking freaking out. We never found out who this man was that would watch us, but it was kind of funny because the guy was just like, what the fuck do you mean you guys let this man watch you watch TV? Get the fuck out of here. Needless to say, sometimes you just gotta let them spirits just be. Like, there's nothing you can fucking do.
Let's talk about my haunted house. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about spooky, scary stuff, and I usually talk about other people's scary stories, but today I'm going to be talking about mine. And as always, if there's a scary story that you would like to submit to me, my email is in my bio. Anyways, let's get into this. Now, if you're not new here, then you know that my house has been a very common topic of discussion on my TikTok page for a while now. Specifically since after posting on my TikTok page about all of these different stories. Usually very specific stories like the one surrounding demonic entities or wolf spirits. You usually get a lot more traction and activity going in my house. With that being said, I am not the only one who experiences this. Other people in my home also experience this activity. It's not just me, but today specifically took the cake for me. So I've been renovating my basement and specifically painting my basement, which means I've been taping a bunch of stuff off. I started in one of the bedrooms and I moved towards the like communal living space. And mind you, up until this point, I felt completely comfortable being in the basement by myself. I've been doing renovations by myself. Like, that is just how it's been. If you remember from a long time ago, I was talking about how my boyfriend saw something in the basement. But long story short, he saw something, told me about it. I knew exactly what he was talking about because it has been there for a long time. I just haven't seen, heard, or like had any activity surrounding that for a really long time up until I started telling these stories. I'm taping off everything. I have my dogs in the basement with me. I am hanging out, taping stuff off, whatever. I cannot reiterate this enough. I was not afraid up until this point. I am taping. I get to the storage room door and it has a bunch of slits in it. Maybe I'll make a video and like show you guys what it looks like. The moment I get up to about eye level with this door, I'm fine. The moment I get eye level with this door, I feel like there is something on the other side of this door watching me through the slits. And yes, sometimes I do psych myself out, but a majority of the time I'm able to like calm myself down. And I am 99.9% able to differentiate between when I feel something and when I'm making something up or conjuring something to be worse than it is. So I immediately stop taping that specific door and I start moving on to another portion of the basement. And this is where it gets really weird. I am home alone and all of a sudden I start to hear little tapping. And if you've been here a long time, then you know that that has been happening for a long time, but specifically in my office where I film all these videos. I haven't heard the tapping in a long time. It started back up today. And to make things worse, I was like, maybe it's just the heater because the heater's in there. I don't know, like houses in the Midwest sometimes just like creak and they settle. I start to hear something shuffle in the storage room. And I don't mean a little bit. I mean enough where my dogs are like going up to the door and tilting their heads and growling at the door. So I said, absolutely not. And this is all I did to clean up. I put the lid on the paint can and took the tape upstairs with me. I was so disinterested in being down there longer than I had to be at that point because I knew that I wasn't making it up. So long story short, I will be cleansing my basement or having somebody cleanse my basement because this is not the first time that this has happened. And I don't like that that is happening because I'm actually in the process of moving my office downstairs. And I just know that I'm not going to be able to film anything if that is happening. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
It was the greatest karaoke night of their lives, but it didn't happen. I came across this awesome story and I had to share it with you. So this girl says that one evening she was sitting alone at home, bored, trying to figure out what to do because a bunch of the local bars that did karaoke on the regular had canceled for some reason. She also said that her regular friend group were all out 70 miles away at a baseball game. I guess after the game, they usually go to those local bars and then end up taking the train back. So she really just had nobody to hang out with and nothing to do. So she's debating on if she should go out anyway by herself. I mean, she's got to run into someone she knows, right? Maybe she'll see someone out there she recognizes and it'll be fun. And then she got to thinking, or since there's tons of bars where she lives, she'll just Google one that she's never been to before. And then maybe she can meet new people and it'll be awesome. So she Google searches for bars near her and one popped up that is actually right across the street from one she frequents and always does karaoke at. And then she's thinking about it. Where that pin was very specifically at like this plain house that didn't have a sign that said there was a bar there. She's been there many times in that area. Never a light on, never any activity going in and out. But she's like, I mean, what do I gotta lose? I'll just show up and check it out. So she drives over and she says, while there still was no sign indicating that there was a bar, the side street next to it, which is usually totally empty, was packed and lined with cars. So she pulls in and finds a space empty right at the end of the line of cars. She gets out and while she's approaching the building, she starts to hear the music blaring from inside and she gets up to the door. She can't see inside and she's not sure if it's just like a house party or if this is really an established bar. So she raises her hand to knock on the door and then it opens up and there's actually two acquaintances that she knows from going to the other bars and they're like, hey, Chicken's here. I guess Chicken's her nickname or something. And before she could even say anything, they were like, come inside. This is freaking awesome in here. So she gets inside and she describes it as the most immaculately white bar she's ever seen. Everything was pristine and shiny, white marble countertops. And she thought it was interesting because even the ceilings were white, but they were those drop tile ceilings. She also mentioned wooden white columns at every corner of the bar. She also clocked an old-timey vintage cigarette machine off to the side. There were TVs lined overhead and karaoke was going on and it was cramped in there. She also said when she looked around, she realized she knew like a lot of people that were there. She said everybody was shoulder to shoulder, like that's how packed it was in there. And then she hears the sound of a familiar voice and they ask, hey, Chicken, what will you be having tonight? And she notices it was actually the owner of the other bar that had canceled karaoke. And then she asks him, like, how long have you had this place here? Because she knows he owns like a bar and another restaurant. And he said, oh yeah, we just acquired it like a couple weeks ago. And then he says, my coworker and I decided that we're each going to keep one of the bars open at night. So she goes on to have an awesome night. She's getting drinks and they're getting shots and she's singing karaoke. And it was so much fun. So then the night eventually has to come to a close. Everybody needs to pay their tabs and leave. And as they're kind of doing that, she decides she's going to hang back because she wanted to chat them up a little bit more and kind of find more out about it. Like, are you open during the day? And he confirmed that, yeah, they actually are and they serve lunch. So she said, well, she's got the next day off, so she's going to come back and get lunch. So she wakes up the next day with a heck of a hangover and decides she is indeed going to go back and have some lunch. She goes up to the door and tries to get in and it's locked. And then she knocks and she's standing there and nobody's answering. So then she decides, okay, I'm going to go across the street to the other bar that he owns and I'm going to ask him, like, did I miss the lunch hour or what's going on? So she goes over to the other bar and she asks for a drink. And as he's pouring it, she starts telling him how much fun she had at the other place. And at first he just laughs and is like, you look like you had a lot of fun last night. And then she starts to ask him about the hours. And he says, we're open from 9 a.m. to 2. And she's like, no, not here. The other bar that you own across the street. And then he kind of gets confused and he's like, we have no other bar. Just the restaurant and this one. And he's like, are you sure you didn't dream this up? And then she's like, well, no, I mean, I didn't get a hangover from a dream. And then he goes, well, how about you check your receipts? And then she's like, that is an excellent idea. So she pops her wallet open and she's looking and it's like, oh my gosh, that's right. All I had was cash. And she paid with cash. And because she paid with cash, she didn't need receipts. I mean, of course. So then other people that were sitting around started to ridicule her, saying how she got wasted at some other bar and didn't even know where she was. So she just shut up, ordered lunch to go, and then left. She's like, and a year later, she's pissed. Like, she's confused. She's angry. She said it was the most fun she has ever had in her life with acquaintances and friends. And how could this all just be completely not in existence? She's like, I know it was there. I remember everybody who was there. I swear it was there. She's like, I remember every single detail. No other bar she's ever been to even remotely looks like that place. She's like, and if I didn't actually go out to the bar, how did I wake up with such a horrendous hangover? She even said, I mean, it couldn't have been a dream because dreams don't give you a hangover and empty your wallet. She also said she went back on Google and her PIN was there. And it remained there for like months after, despite the fact that she tried to report it as inaccurate. And that pin remained. And she wants to know, what do you think? Has anybody experienced anything similar? Like actually traveling to a pinned Google destination only to be told later that it never existed. So let me know your thoughts. And if you're new here, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
Let's read another scary Reddit story. Not a personal experience, but a friend of mine left to go to university in London. She had bought a one-bedroom flat in a block of flats in the city. Over the first few nights, all was fine, until in the morning she began to notice cushions on the floor, which were on her sofa the night before, and magazines not where she left them. Slightly unnerved, she ignored it. She always made sure she locked the doors and windows at night, so no one could get in. However, one night she woke up and saw someone standing in her bedroom. She screamed, and the person ran off. Her scream was so loud that a neighbor in the next flat woke up and rushed to see if she was okay. Police were phoned, and the flat was searched. Nothing stolen and no sign of anyone in the flat. The police thought she might have been dreaming or even had sleep paralysis. One thing she noted is the front door was unlocked, even though she was adamant she locked it. Feeling scared, she wanted to move back home, but instead, her landlord changed the locks, and an alarm was installed in the property. She even had a few of her classmates stay with her for a few nights after it happened. Weeks passed, nothing else happened until she gets a knock at the door. She answers it, and the police are outside. They sit her down, and apparently they did an early morning raid on a man a few streets away. When searching his property and seizing his devices, they found loads of photographs and videos of her sleeping using a night vision camera. It turns out he was an old tenant that was evicted from the flat and was a known offender to police for voyeurism offenses and some additional ones, but she doesn't know what they are. When questioned, he quickly admitted who the photos were of and the address of the tenant, which police then linked to the original complaint a few weeks prior. It turns out this guy had been going into her flat at night using his own key that he had made a copy of after returning the original key when he left. He said he would come into the flat and just watch her sleep and take photos and videos. Sometimes he would sit on her sofa and read her magazines. Anyway, the guy was sectioned under Mental Health Act and is in a secure hospital. However, my friend has had trouble sleeping ever since. Last I heard, she now owns a dog and gets her locks changed regularly due to paranoia. She puts cups on the handles and has sensor alarms throughout her home as well. That reminds me of that movie that has Ashley Benson in it. I'll put a picture of the movie right here. You have to watch it. It is so freaking scary. Anyway, that's what it reminds me of.
People move out of their house not because they can't live at their house anymore due to expenses or that they want a bigger home. Sometimes they move out of their house because they can't deal with the grief of losing someone they love and seeing them manifest before their eyes, doing things that they used to do. Lewis and Margaret lived in their Merchantville home in New Jersey since 1930. They ended up selling the home in 1998. However, the only reason that they sold it was because Margaret had naturally passed away. Now, it was natural causes. It wasn't that something happened bad to her, but she had died, and Lewis couldn't live there anymore by himself. After Margaret had passed away, Lewis had thought that he had seen her around the house multiple times doing things that she usually did. Drink coffee, come down the stairs, fold the laundry, things that he used to see her do when they were together, but he never acknowledged her because he thought he was hallucinating. Time it really got bad and he couldn't handle it anymore, so he decided to sell the house. In 1998, he had sold the house to a family of three. Family buying the house was amazing. It was a great price in a great neighborhood. What else could they ask for? However, the old man did not let them know that the house also came with Margaret because he swore he was just hallucinating. So, of course, long and behold, Margaret made herself known. However, Margaret didn't make herself known that quickly to the adults. But to the little girl in that house, she made herself known. The girl began to tell her parents that she kept seeing an old lady in her closet. Not just in her closet, but in the kitchen, coming down the stairs, even in her bedroom, standing at the doorway. Of course, her parents had their beliefs, and they said, well, we'll just pray it away. Whatever it is, we'll just pray it away. One night, they decided to pray for the little girl to be able to go to sleep and stop seeing whoever it is that she's seeing around the house. Now, Margaret didn't take well to this. The little girl not seeing Margaret around the house was a blessing in disguise. She didn't know who that old lady was, and she did not want to know. She was just scared of the old lady because she knew the old lady did not physically exist in this realm. Remember, this was the late 90s, so house phones were still a thing and cell phones not so much. Now, when the little girl got home, she's thinking, okay, I'm going to be home alone for an hour until my parents get home. I have to call them at their job to let them know that I'm home safe, and I'm just going to watch TV. She's thinking that after that prayer, whatever that thing was or old lady was no longer in her home. So she gets home, she takes her book bag off, and the moment she shuts the door, she hears a scream coming from up the stairs. And all she could hear is, "You think you can get rid of me in my own home?" Like that, a gush of wind hit the girl in the face, and she started to cry and say, "No, no, 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 no," and turned around and tried to open the door. And as she's trying to open the door, she could hear the old lady in her ear tell her, "This is my home, and you are the intruder." The little girl stood outside crying, and finally when her parents got home, they asked her, "What happened? Why are you outside? And why are you crying?" And she said, the old lady said that we are the ones that are intruding in her own home. We are the intruders, and we're trying to kick her out. And they're like, the old lady said that we're intruders. What? So the dad runs inside and tries to find the old lady. Doesn't find anybody. And he comes back outside and he says, "I don't see anyone." And that's when the mom saw her. She was standing right behind her husband with this face of disgust and anger. And she pointed at the old lady in disbelief. She couldn't speak. Her husband turned around and saw no one. Decided she was going to do some investigation on the house. And what she found out was that the old man that sold them the home was the first owners of the house and they were the second. However, the old man had purchased the home with his wife. And she didn't remember the old man with his wife that day selling the home to her. She just remembered the old man. And all he kept saying was that he couldn't live in the house anymore because there was too much grief, too many memories. And she's thinking that the grief and the memories was the apparition of the wife not leaving the home. Able to track down Lewis, the old man, and she was able to have a conversation with him, and she told him, "Listen, we keep seeing your wife around the house. Well, my daughter is, and then I saw her. What should we do?" And he's like, "My wife, but my wife died." She said, "No, she has died. However, her spirit has not died." I'm going to tell Lewis, the old man, "Your wife won't leave our daughter alone. You need to come to the house and tell her that we're the new owners and that she needs to make peace with us because we tried to pray her away and that did not end well." First, Lewis decided to go because he felt bad that the whole reason that Margaret was haunting these poor people was because he sold the home because he thought he was hallucinating her. So he went to the house and the room and expressed to Margaret's spirit, even though he couldn't see her, that it was time to move on. And if she wasn't ready to move on, that she had to make peace with the family because they really did love the home and they really wanted to live there. And it wasn't fair to them to be haunted by her anger. So stressed to her, don't haunt the baby. The little girl just wants to enjoy her room, wants to sleep at night, not knowing that you're staring at her while she's sleeping. If you could definitely do that, that would be great. But I can no longer live here with you, Margaret, Lewis said to her. "I can't. Your memories are bringing me grief, and all I want to remember is the happy moments that we shared, the loving moments that we shared in this house. And I don't want to be here anymore. I'm sorry. I need to leave. And if you're going to stay, you need to make peace with this family." Lewis left, the little girl says that the old lady stopped coming around often. However, she still made herself known, but not in a scary way, just in a way of smiling from afar and disappearing into the wall. But nothing more and nothing less. What do you guys think that was? And do you guys think that was really Margaret? And if so, would you guys be able to live with her in your home?
Let's read a scary and true story about the Hat Man. This story comes from Lady. There's something that's always stayed with me, something I've carried quietly for a long time, and I don't even know why it still feels so heavy to talk about. but it does. It happened one night when I was staying with my ex at his grandma's house, the one we were renting at the time, and everything about that place felt normal during the day, almost too normal, which somehow makes the memory worse. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night, like I'd been yanked out of sleep instead of drifting awake, and the room was dark and completely still, but there was this crushing, unnatural feeling in the air. It wasn't just fear, it was heavier than that. Thick, like the atmosphere itself had shifted, and before I even opened my eyes fully, I knew something was wrong, like I wasn't alone and something was in the room that didn't belong there. When I finally focused straight ahead, I saw it, a figure standing there, completely black, darker than the shadows around it, but not blending into them. It was tall and perfectly still, wearing what looked like a long trench coat that fell straight down, with a hat with a wide brim. Not a top hat, just a flat, wide-brimmed hat. And I didn't see any red eyes or eyes at all. It had no face, no features, nothing that I could make out, and yet I could feel it watching me. What terrified me even more was that the entire figure had this static-like quality, like an image that couldn't quite hold together, reminding me of an old TV on a scrambled channel, flickering and distorted, buzzing slightly at the edges as if it was phasing in and out of the room, never fully solid and never fully gone, which somehow made it feel even more unreal and more threatening at the same time. I tried to move, sit up, scream, turn my head, anything, but my body would not respond. I was completely frozen, my heart pounding so hard that it hurt while everything else felt slowed down and trapped. All I could do was squeeze my eyes shut and repeat over and over again in my head, "Go away, go away, go away," because I didn't dare speak, and it felt like if I acknowledged it out loud, it would become more real, more solid, and I don't know how long it lasted. It might have been seconds or minutes, but it felt endless. When I finally opened my eyes again, it was gone, and the room was exactly the same as before. Empty, quiet, normal. But I wasn't, because I was shaken. Like I'd come dangerously close to something I didn't understand. I don't know what it was or how to explain it or what to make of it. All I know is that it felt real in a way that's hard to put into words, more intense and more frightening than anything my imagination could have created. And sometimes, even years later, that feeling comes back like a reminder that it really happened. I've actually had a similar experience with the Hat Man. I had sleep paralysis when I was like 14 or 15, and I woke up in the middle of the night, couldn't move. I saw the Hat Man in the corner of my room, and then I blinked, and a couple seconds later, I felt pressure on my chest and was hallucinating that it was sitting on my chest. I think this is another good example about how the human mind can be so scary and can really play tricks on us. Thank you, lady, for sending in this story. If you guys have any sleep paralysis stories, please comment them down below. I'm curious to know whether or not you guys have seen the Hat Man before. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity, featuring my initial necklace. This is another one that would be good for a Valentine's Day gift. I wear this all the time and get compliments at work. Now onto the story. Okay, so I grew up in Vegas. I lived in a home that was once on the very outskirts of the desert. Mafia body dumping area back when Vegas just started. The what? One evening, my sister and I were having a sleepover with some friends. I love how it says that so casually and just goes right back into the story. We decided let's go play hide and seek in the pure darkness. Mind you, we're 15 to 17 years of age at this point. Our friend decided, hey, let's use the camera flash of my camera as the only form of light. I feel like I might know where this is going. We all agreed to this because we didn't think anything of it. Well, the way that the upstairs of the house is, my parents' bedroom was one end of the hall and my sister's room was on the other end of the long hallway. On the right side of the hallway had two doors, bathroom and another bedroom. The left side of the hall had two doors, closet and a bedroom. I had been standing by my parents' door and I heard what sounded like my door creaking open. So I quickly turned and flashed my camera to use the light. Of course, my door had been cracked open and I was excited because I thought that my friends were in there. Went into my room, searched around and used the camera to take a picture of my room. Suddenly, I heard giggling coming from my closet. I went to open up the door and used a quick flash and no one was there. So now I'm getting a little scared. As you should be. As you should be. Because I was sure that I heard someone laughing. I basically ran downstairs and found all of my friends and my sister down there. So I asked who was in my room earlier and everyone looked confused. It was the demon. It was the demon that was giggling and trying to unalive you in the middle of pure darkness and hide and seek. So my friend whose camera we were using wanted to look at the photos that we took. Now, mind you, it's like 2 or 3 a.m., which is never a good time to be awake. We're looking at photos and suddenly we stop at the photo of my door from me standing by my parents' door. Clear as day, we saw what looked like a small petite woman leaning around the back of my door with a wide white grin and blacked out fingers gripping the door itself. Hell no. I would set that bitch ablaze. When I tell you I instantly wanted to vomit, it was crazy. Then we go to the picture of the closet. Clear as day. Another photo of her crouched on the floor in the closet. Fuck that. We called my mom to come home so fast, who's a cop, because we thought that someone was in the house. No one was there. I never slept in my room again after that and had to change rooms. I would have had to change houses. I am not fucking staying in that bitch. Hard fucking pass. What the fuck do you mean this bitch was crouched in the fucking closet? Just giggling and shit. Ain't shit funny. Right on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. That's creepy as fuck. That is scary, creepy, spooky for sure. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link to read my profile. I'll see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends. Who needs to hear a series of spooky stories when we are all simultaneously living the same spooky story? Some worse than others, unfortunately. This bracelet is cute. It comes in a 2-pack with a necklace as well. Unisex. Great Valentine's Day present. I don't even know what to say anymore, and sometimes it feels like we're all wasting our breath because people will see what's happening and still find some way to justify the things that are being done to innocent people. All of it is exhausting. Every time I open my phone, and it's not just me, it's everybody, but every time I open my phone, every time I watch the news, every time I just open my laptop, it's some new bullshit about the government just fucking everything up and people continuously defending it. People will have video proof, cold hard evidence, and still say that that person was at fault and continue to justify the aggressors, the actual aggressor. I said it in a previous video and I will stand on it. ICE is a government-funded terrorist group. People are so blinded by their titles that they continue to say, well, they're a federal officer. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. Federal officers shouldn't be doing what they're fucking doing. Federal officers shouldn't be behaving the way that these fucking people are. Everything just keeps getting scarier and scarier. An ICU nurse at the VA was brutally murdered by ICE. And the people who are on the wrong side are arguing that he shouldn't have had a gun at a protest. It's so funny to me that the narrative is always on the side of pro-gun until something like this happens. And I'm just never going to understand it. I'm never going to understand the hypocrisy. I'm never going to understand because we watched Kyle Rittenhouse with an AR or whatever the fuck that big ass gun was, terrorizing people at a protest. And you guys were in support of that and in support of his right to utilize the Second Amendment, his right to bear arms. I'm not going to lie to y'all, I have cried on and off all day long because I just keep seeing the stories. I keep seeing everything about him and everything about Renee Good and Keith Porter, people who were murdered by this government-funded terrorist group. And it just breaks me. What the fuck do we do? What do we do? It's just getting worse. And there are so many people that are neutral or just don't give a fuck, and they will tell you that they don't give a fuck. I don't understand. I'm never going to understand. But fuck this. Fuck ICE. Fuck this administration. I want you all to know that those of you who are in support of this and backing these people hiding their faces after they brutally murder and assault people in the streets and kidnap people and children. I want you all to know that if you are neutral or you support this, if you are as Christian as you say you are and you believe in the God that you say that you believe in truly, you will not be going where you think that you are going to go. I can promise you that when your life is over and all is said and done, you're not going to go to the place that you think that you're going to go to. You will hear those famous last words, "Depart from me, for I never knew you."
Sometimes things happen in life that are kind of weird or they're unexplainable, but they're not really that big of a deal, so you kind of just let it go very easily. but it really makes you wonder how deep they really go. For example, this seemingly glitchy story I have. So this woman named Sarah says that she ordered some food through a delivery app and she checked that she would like it as soon as possible. So at 8:09 p.m., she gets a ding on her phone. It's the delivery message that the order has been delivered, but she didn't get a knock or a ring on the door. So she goes outside and looks around and checks, and there is no food there. It was supposed to be hand delivered, by the way. So she calls customer support, and what they do is they put her on a 3-way call with customer service, her, and the driver. She says, yeah, she approached the door, knocked on it. A blonde girl with a gray sweatshirt opened the door and took the food. She also made it very clear that there was a white Jeep parked out front, and she even repeated back the address. And indeed, the address was correct. Sarah also says she does have a white Jeep that does sit right out front. But yet, she never heard a sound. Certainly didn't answer the door to pick it up. By the way, Sarah is blonde and she does own a gray sweatshirt, but she was wearing it the night before. So where Sarah lives, there are neighbors on either side of her. One, there is an older couple, and then the other one is a guy around her age, and he has a girlfriend who is a brunette. So Sarah just wanted to be sure. So she goes over to the younger couple and knocks on the door, and the guy answers, and she asks, was my food delivered here? And they confirmed that no, it wasn't, but she still said she even kind of looked around behind him to see if she could see it there. She thought it was pretty funny. Anyway, no food there. So no big deal. I mean, Sarah was able to reorder and get it for free. It's just really freaking weird. They got the description of her. They've got the car, the address. It was definitely her, just the wrong outfit. There's like, as long as the food was delivered to another me in a parallel universe, that's fine. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. It's pretty cool. I love little glitch stories like that. And if you're new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
Texas haunted houses have always been some of my favorites because honestly, they're some of the creepiest. The Hill House in Brothels, Texas is one of the most, or considered one of the most haunted places in all of Texas. It has served as just a normal house, a brothel, and even a boarding house. There have been a lot of things that have been linked to this house, including people being, or their lives being taken. There's even like occult vibes going on. It's just really creepy. People have claimed to see the typical paranormal stuff, like things moving on their own, lights flickering, cold spots, hearing voices, and even seeing apparitions, but there are several notable ghosts that we need to talk about. Probably the most famous ghost in the Hill House is that of a young boy named Joshua. Now, it is believed that his life was taken under mysterious circumstances, and that's probably why he's tied to the house. But many people claim to hear his playful voice all the way throughout the house, but specifically around the staircase. People also talk about the scratch room. Several people who have stayed in this room have come out with scratches on their body. Now, at first, I figured that they were just hearing scratches, so it got even creepier when I realized that they were physically being scratched while staying in this room. This house has also been extensively researched by paranormal investigators, and they have caught full-body apparitions, voices, EVPs, and really disturbing, movements. They have footage of this too. It is really creepy, but others think that it's more than just a haunting, that this house might actually be a portal to another realm. Some people believe that the basement to the Hill House is where the portal itself exists, because the energy in this area is much darker than anywhere else in the house. But on top of that, people have often claimed to see a woman whose unsettling laugh echoes through the halls late at night, which honestly I could not handle, and I would immediately run. But as soon as people have heard her laugh, they've gone to investigate, and there is never anybody there. So what do you think? Do you think this place might actually be haunted, or a portal to another realm, or is it just being in a house that is believed to be haunted makes people see things? Honestly, I don't think that I could stay the night here or anything like that, but what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more spooky things.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. Living in a haunted house. Side note, we're in the middle of a snowstorm right now, and something about it snowing and being stuck inside just really makes me just want all the scary stories. I grew up in a house in the middle of nowhere. It was built in the 1800s, and I'm pretty sure it used to be a dairy farm at one point. I've had a lot of weird experiences I can't explain in that house, and I thought I would share some of the crazier ones. In the middle of nowhere, you have a really old house built in the 1800s. You have possible cow ghosts. I mean, this is just... it's gonna be good. For starters, if you count the basement and attic as floors, the house has 4. Basement, main floor, upper floor, and the attic. My very first encounter with the paranormal happened when I was 16. I remember my parents were out of the house, my 2 brothers were downstairs, and I was in the office upstairs. I had to go downstairs myself to get something, and I had to walk past my parents' bedroom, which is at the top of the landing. Their door was closed, and as soon as I stepped down onto the first step, I hear a panicked female voice whisper, "Help me," from my parents' room. The voices are the worst. I don't care. The voices are the worst. Naturally, I stepped back and burst into the room thinking it was one of my brothers playing a prank on me, but there was no one there. I've also had 3 different people tell me that they've seen a similar ghost at different points in the house. Each one of these 3 people have told me independent of one another, and there was no way they all got together and collaborated on the same story beforehand, which makes it even creepier. The first person, a friend named Kevin, said that on more than one occasion he'd seen the ghost of a woman wandering around the house and even outside. And Kevin came over again? That wasn't Kevin's one and only time visiting? He said she had shoulder-length brown hair, either kind of wavy or straight. She was white and she wore a purple dress similar to what Nicole Kidman had on in the movie The Others. My ex-sister-in-law Hannah said that she saw the same woman a couple of times, most notably in the attic. She gave the exact description: hair, dress, color of the dress, and the fact the ghost seemed really sweet. Then Savannah. She and I were hanging out with her niece Lainey when we realized it was getting late and I had to take them home. Savannah goes inside first, steps into the enclosed porch, and freezes before she opens the door that leads into the dining room. I ask her what's going on, and she turns to me with fear in her eyes and whispers, "I saw her." That gave me chills. I don't know what it was about that, but it just set the creeps all over my body. Oh, I hated that. Like, I could just picture myself in that situation. Like, you're just walking inside and all of a sudden you just glimpse somebody. Always the worst when you can genuinely like picture it in your head, like it happening to you being in that situation. I ask her what she's talking about, and she tells me that she saw the same woman that Kevin and Hannah had told me about, except instead of looking sweet or human, the version Savannah described looked angry enough to kill someone. She said that the skin on half of the woman's face was missing, and that there was only a skull there. She said the ghost was making her way across the dining room to the basement. Thought she was making stuff up and stepped inside, only to see the basement doorknob jiggle by itself like someone was trying to open it. Oh my God. Well, now I want to find out what happened to the woman who's in your house. Did you do some research? What have we learned?
This is why you shouldn't play with Ouija boards. New Year High, I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff, and I actually have an email where anyone finds this page can send me their ghost story. And this is one of them. So let's get into it. This story comes from somebody who did not let me know whether or not they wanted to remain anonymous, so for obvious reasons, I'm going to keep them anonymous. The person who sent me this email starts off the entire thing by saying that she relates to one of the videos that I covered about sleep paralysis, and specifically the fact that whenever she falls asleep, the dream or sleep paralysis or nightmare looked exactly like the room that she falls asleep in. And she's been experiencing this specific kind of sleep paralysis for years, but it initially started in high school. Her and her family at that time lived in this massive old home that was recently renovated before they moved in. In her bedroom, she had these sheer curtains that acted as a door to her closet, and she normally closed these curtains before she went to bed, but this particular night she did not. Which means that there was just this opening into the closet all night as she slept. And in the dream, she is wearing the same pajamas, she has the same nail color, she fell asleep in the same position, etc., etc., etc. Everything is the same, to the point where even the laundry on the floor is the same in the dream. In this particular dream, there are children running around her bed, lifting up the covers, and she is swatting at them in the dream like, "Leave me alone, put the covers back down." And after a while of this happening, she accidentally hits one of them while trying to get them to go away. In the immediate moment that that happened, a gray, slimy, wet hand comes up from underneath the blankets and begins to choke her. Now, this is where it gets very strange. Right before this arm comes up and grabs her throat, she is able to tuck her chin down just a tiny bit to where the hand actually goes into her mouth. to the point where she can taste the hand. And I think that's very interesting because by the time she wakes up from being strangled in this dream, she is squished up against her headboard, sitting straight up, as if something was pushing her back and into the headboard. And everything was the exact same in the dream as it was when she woke up. The room was the same, everything was the same. The person who sent this email also mentions that they had a basement in this home that she could just not sleep in for the life of her. Even when she had friends over, she just couldn't do it because every single time that she did, she would wake up at 3 a.m. on the dot with the feeling that someone was watching her. She would also have these kinds of dreams in the basement and just dream about this thing like lurking around a corner as she runs up the stairs away from it. And the person who sent me this email says that she believes that this whole thing started because her mom gifted her a Ouija board and she did not say goodbye to the entity that she was talking to, who she also thought was her grandfather. So this family actually did end up moving out of the house because her parents got a divorce. And what's interesting is the people who moved in after them also got a divorce while living in this home. The person who sent me this email's husband also said that he felt like there was some weird evil energy radiating from the basement. Anyways, they move into a new home. And again, she has another dream like this. Only this time she can see a mother and a child. And in the dream, she can hear this woman crying and sobbing and holding her baby. The woman turns around and starts shoving the baby into her face, begging her to take this child. And as the person who sent me this email is like shoving away, she's like, no, I don't want to take this baby. No, please don't make me take the baby. She wakes up again, squished against the headboard, sitting straight up. And this time she is sitting on her pillows and had kicked all of the covers off. She also says that she was curled up so tightly while sitting on these pillows that it was like she was curling away from this thing. And that was the only difference in the room versus the dream, was the position that she woke up in. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Hello, Ghost Hunts team. I'm writing to submit a video for your consideration. It was captured during an investigation at the Ancient Ram Inn in Gloucestershire. I've attached the clip to the email and wanted to provide some background and context for what we experienced that night. Okay. During our time at the Ancient Ram Inn, we encountered several instances of unexplained activity. Most notably, we experienced flashlights turning on and off in response to questions, and I captured a video of a small inflatable child's play ball moving on its own without anyone near it.
Weird.
The ball was similar to a little kid's football-style toy. Lightweight and inflatable in its movement was unexpected. It appeared to happen during active questioning, which is why I felt it important to share. Throughout the investigation, we felt we were communicating with a young girl who identified herself as Amy. From what we understand, there are stories suggesting that a girl and her mother were once found buried on the property, which makes the experience especially sad and unsettling. While we can't confirm this, the interaction felt emotional rather than aggressive, and the responses we received were consistent with that presence. The ancient Ram Inn is widely known for its long and dark history. It is believed to date back to the 12th century and is built on land associated with ancient pagan worship. Over the years, there have been reports of ritual activity, and legends suggest that human remains may still lie beneath the building. The location has gained a reputation as one of the most haunted places in England, with reports of apparitions, objects moving on their own, and intelligent responses during investigations. I wanted to share this footage as we believe it captures a genuinely compelling supernatural moment. Thank you very much for taking the time to review this. That's weird.
Whoa.
Where's the ball?
It's like it's struggling.
There at the back to the left.
Alright, you can turn it off.
That's so weird.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
In November of 2004, 52-year-old Peter Porco and his wife, 54-year-old Joan Porco, were like so many other middle-aged, middle-class Americans. They lived in Del Mar, New York, in a comfortable two-story home, and they worked for a living. Peter was an appellate court clerk, and Joan was a speech pathologist. They had been married for over 30 years, and they had 2 sons. Christopher was a 21-year-old student at the University of Rochester, and his brother, Jonathan, was a 23-year-old naval officer stationed at a submarine base in Groton, Connecticut. On Monday, November 15th, 2004, Peter woke up to start his typical Monday morning work routine. He got up, he got out of bed, he went into the bathroom, he relieved himself, he looked in the mirror, he shaved, he got dressed in his work clothes, he went downstairs, he put on a pot of coffee. While the coffee was brewing, he unloaded the dishwasher and then put the dirty dishes into the dishwasher and started it. He wanted to get his newspaper, so he went outside, he got his newspaper, but he realized he locked himself out of the front door, so he got the spare key out from underneath the mat, opened the front door, went inside, he sat down, had some coffee, read the newspaper. After a few minutes, he put his coffee cup in the sink, he packed himself a lunch in his lunchbox, and then he headed for the door to head for work. Peter was known as a very reliable employee who was also very punctual and rarely missed work. So when he didn't get to work that Monday morning, the court was a little bit confused. They called him to see if he was okay. He didn't pick up. So they dispatched a court officer to go make sure he was okay. And so the officer arrives at his house. He sees cars in the driveway. The front door's shut. He goes up. He knocks on the door. Nobody answers. He tries the handle of the front door. He realizes it's open. So he opens the door and he yells out, "Hey, I'm just looking for Peter." And the door hits something on the ground. He pokes his head inside and looks down, and there on the ground, the thing blocking the door, is Peter Porco's body. He's clearly deceased, and he clearly has a massive head wound. The court officer steps outside immediately, calls 911, local police show up, they go inside, and sure enough, Peter is dead. They go upstairs and they find his wife, Joan, in bed, also with a massive head wound, but she was still alive. Joan was rushed to a hospital where she underwent emergency surgery and then was put into a medically induced coma. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation into who could have done this. They quickly discovered that the home's alarm system had been smashed and a phone line, because there still was landlines at the time, had been cut from the outside, and a screen in one of the windows had been slashed that looked like the way someone climbed into the house. However, nothing appeared to have been stolen because police almost immediately found Peter's wallet with money inside of it still sitting in the house, as well as very expensive jewelry that belonged to Joan still sitting in the house. As they continued to search the house, they discovered a fireman's axe that belonged to the Porcos hidden inside of one of the bedroom closets, and it was very clear this was the murder weapon. The Porco sons had been away during this attack. John was on his submarine in Connecticut, and Chris was at the University of Rochester, and in fact, Chris found out about the attack on his parents when he saw a news report, because this story of this innocent, typical-seeming American couple in a quiet suburb getting struck down by some axe-wielding maniac had gone totally viral, and it was all over the news. And so Chris called the police to get more information about his parents' death. Here's the recording.
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by a Times Union saying that my parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information for me.
Hey, Chris, whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, you're in Rochester?
Yes.
Okay, and you're hearing from the Times Union?
Yeah, they said my parents were found, I guess, dead. I don't know. They didn't say how or anything.
So you will be here probably, you're going to go right to Albany Med?
I don't know. I don't even know where my mom is, but...
Yeah, she is at Albany Med.
Okay. Do you know her condition?
No, because I haven't talked to her. Let me give you my pager number.
As you can tell, Chris is extremely emotional. He's beside himself. He can barely speak. He's so upset about what's happened to his parents. No, actually, he sounds as calm as if he's ordering a pizza, because Chris Porco was actually a psychopath, and he was the one who attacked his parents with the axe. As it turns out, Chris was failing at school and taking out huge loans in his father's name by forging his signature. And his father found out about it. So Mr. and Mrs. Porco write their son a strongly worded email where they tell him this behavior has to stop, and they're very disappointed in him, but they love him and they will help him get back on his feet. Chris responded by driving home in the middle of the night, sneaking into his house and attacking his parents with an axe. While this case is already disturbing and horrific and tragic, it's what happens to Chris's father after the attack that makes it one of the most brutal cases of all time. After being struck 16 times in the head and laying unconsciously in his bed as his sons snuck out of his house, Peter suddenly sat up and began his morning routine. He got dressed, he went to the bathroom, he shaved, he went downstairs, he made coffee, he did his chores, he went outside to get the newspaper, he got locked out, he got the key from under the mat, went back inside, he packed his own lunch. When he was finally ready to go, he headed for the door and then he collapsed and he died. Due to the severity of Peter's head wound, his brain was basically broken and it was unable to recognize he had been gravely injured. So in his final moments, he believed it was just a typical Monday morning going about his work routine, when in reality, he had a gaping head wound and he was basically dead after the 16th blow to his head. One of the more surprising and heart-wrenching details of this case is that Joan Porco, she did survive the attack, and after she came out of that medically induced coma, she said she forgot all the details of the attack, even though when she was discovered in her bed, she did indicate that Chris, her son, was the attacker. Nonetheless, she got together $250,000 to post Chris's bail, and she allowed him to come stay with her during his trial. And the two attended the trial together, walking into the courthouse hand in hand. Chris was very quickly found guilty of killing his father and attempting to kill his mother, and he was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. Despite the verdict, Joan Porco still speaks to Christopher over the phone and frequently visits him in prison. It's unclear if she still believes he is innocent. In 1988, 35-year-old Ivan McGuire was an experienced skydiving instructor with over 700 jumps to his name. On April 5th of that year, he was working in North Carolina, and he was tasked with filming other instructors and their students after they jumped out of the plane. The way this worked is Ivan would go up in the plane with the instructor and their student, and Ivan would be the first to leap out of the plane. He would roll onto his back, and he would film upward towards the plane, and he would capture the student and instructor jumping out, and Ivan would continue to film them until they pulled their chutes, at which point he would pull his. Now, being 1988, the filming equipment that Ivan was using was much larger and more cumbersome than something you would use today. He had a voice-activated camera attached to his helmet, and then from there was a cord going to this big heavy VHS deck that he kept in a backpack. But despite the nuisance of the equipment, Ivan went up with the first student and instructor and successfully filmed their jump. When he got back on the ground, Ivan went over to the riggers and he gave them his parachutes, they could pack it for him, and then Ivan went over to a bench and began fiddling with his camera equipment. It was clear he was frustrated with the way it was set up and he was making all sorts of adjustments. When it was time for Ivan's second jump of the day with a new instructor and new student, he was so preoccupied with fiddling with his camera that he forgot to grab his parachute. And so he ran over to the plane and he's about to get on and they say, "Hey, Ivan, you're not wearing a parachute." And he goes, "Oh my goodness, you're right." He runs back over, he gets his parachute, he loads back in the plane, he goes up to altitude, and then he jumps out, he films the instructor and student, it all goes great, he makes it to the ground, and his second jump is a success. And just like after the first jump of the day, Ivan takes off his parachute, he gives it to the riggers, and then he goes and sits down on a bench and continues to fidget and fiddle around with his camera equipment. When it was time for Ivan's third jump of the day with yet another new instructor and student, this time he grabbed his parachute, put all of his gear on, ran over to the plane, hopped on board, and he took off. Once they got up to their jumping altitude, which was 10,500 feet, Ivan turned on his camera, and the footage shows the instructor and the student kind of getting their gear together, sitting across from him in the plane. The jump master towards the front of the plane slides open the side door. Ivan, who's going to be the first one out, makes his way to the edge. He turns himself upside down, so he's sitting basically with his back outside of the plane. He makes sure the instructor and student are right on top of him, ready to jump out right afterwards. Once they're ready, Ivan falls out backwards and continues to film. You see the instructor and student jump out right afterwards. Ivan continues to film them as they go down. They're in free fall for a few seconds, and then you see the instructor and student pull their parachutes, at which time Ivan reaches back to pull his own, but he can't find it. For a few seconds he flails, and you can see his hands coming out in front of the camera, and he's trying to reach for his ripcord, and then he realizes what's happened. That parachute he grabbed before he loaded up in the plane was not a parachute. He grabbed his heavy backpack that had that big VHS deck in it, and when he put it on, he mistook it for the parachute. And so now, falling at terminal velocity with no way to stop himself, he begins yelling out, "Oh no! Oh God, no!" And he keeps reaching back as if he's just going to find this cord, but there's nothing there. And after a few agonizing seconds, you see the ground getting closer and closer and closer, and then it cuts out. Ivan's body was later found about a mile and a half outside of the drop zone in the woods. His camera and videotape were severely damaged, but they were able to splice it together, and that's why we know what happened in his final moments. An investigation into his death showed the pilot made the same mistake Ivan did. When he saw Ivan with that backpack on, he assumed it was a parachute, and so ultimately Ivan's death was ruled an accident. Fair warning, if you look into this case, you will almost certainly come across the actual footage of Ivan's final jump. In October of 2002, Mark and his wife Kathy were on their way to a baby shower in Baltimore, Maryland that was being held for them by Kathy's family. It would be a 7-hour drive from their home in Ohio, so Mark and Kathy tried to get out the door as early as possible, but one thing led to another and they got a pretty late start. By midnight, they were only about an hour away from their final destination, but they both desperately needed a bathroom break. And so they pulled into a rest stop in Frederick County, Maryland, which is about an hour outside of Washington, D.C. The rest area parking lot was completely vacant except for one car, which was a dark blue late model 4-door sedan that was parked head in right in front of the bathroom. Mark and Kathy pulled into a spot that was a few over from the sedan. They got out, they walked up to the restroom. Mark was done first, so he waited outside of the women's restroom for his wife. As he waited, he turned around to face the sedan that initially, when he first pulled in the lot, he believed was empty. But now, as he's looking at it, he can clearly see there are 2 people in the front 2 seats. A middle-aged man who's sitting behind the steering wheel looking directly at Mark, and then next to this guy is a sleeping teenager. And immediately, Mark felt really creeped out by these 2 guys. I mean, they are in this random rest stop in the middle of the night. They're the only ones there, and this guy is just staring menacingly at Mark. And so Mark's doing his best not to be intimidated and to stand his ground and not act fazed by what's happening right in front of him. But in the back of his mind, he is just praying his wife comes out of that bathroom as soon as possible so they can get the heck out of here and away from these 2 creepy guys. Finally, his wife did come out. He grabbed her by the hand and without any explanation, rushed them back to their car, hopped in, locked the doors, turned it on, and began backing out. And as he did, he looked over at the sedan and he saw the guy behind the steering wheel, the middle-aged guy, was looking over at Mark with that same menacing look on his face. Mark also noticed there was something odd about the sedan's trunk. There was a fist-size hole right above the license plate where you would normally put the key inside of. So the whole scene was just totally bizarre, and after Mark and Kathy sped out and were back on the highway, Mark explained to Kathy that there were actually 2 people inside of that sedan, and they really creeped him out, and that's why he had grabbed her and rushed them back into the car. And so she agreed that was pretty creepy, but by the time the couple got to the baby shower in Baltimore, they had completely forgotten about their experience at the rest stop. The baby shower went well, and before long, Mark and Kathy were back home in Ohio. About a week later, the couple was watching TV in their home when a breaking news bulletin came across, and it showed a reporter who was standing at the exact same rest stop that they had stopped in on the way to Baltimore in Frederick County, Maryland, and behind them was the same late model sedan that they had seen parked at that rest stop when they had pulled in. The headline of this special news bulletin was DC Snipers Caught. It would turn out that middle-aged man sitting in the driver's seat of the sedan staring at Mark was none other than John Allen Mohammed, and the guy next to him, the teenager who was sleeping, was Lee Boyd Malvo. These were the 2 men that were responsible for the highly coordinated 3-week-long attack that left 10 people dead in the Washington, D.C. area. The fist-size hole that Mark saw on the back of their trunk was what they used to shoot through because it allowed them to stay concealed in the trunk while they were shooting. Mohammed and Malvo had been using that particular rest stop in Frederick County as a place to hide out in between their killings. When Mark and Kathy pulled in next to them, they were only halfway through their killing spree. Mark believes the only reason he and his wife were not targeted is because the killers most likely were trying to keep this rest stop off the radar because it was their hiding spot, and so they wouldn't have risked an attack there. Although, ironically, they would ultimately be caught in that rest stop. Mohammed was executed by lethal injection in 2009, and Malvo is serving a life sentence.
Random things that were left here of Josh's break at the house. Just will be standing there and it'll just break.
You're kidding.
No, it's happened 3 times.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So the bowl outside broke. If that was in the corner of the room, had moved across the room in the middle of the room and broken. There was glass all in my bedroom. His lamp was cracked in half on the couch. What the hell was that?
Where's Kingston?
Right here. Both the pets are right here. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's the weirdest shit. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's probably gonna be something of Josh's. Oh my god, it's his mirror.
Get everything that belongs in the house.
Okay, a young 17-year-old boy, very angry, very frustrated, feeling like he has not been heard, never was heard, feeling very isolated, feeling alone, suffered from depression, suffered from a lot of anger, is not connected to anyone in the home, not even connected to the ex. There was a camaraderie, like a familiarity with a male presence. That's all that was. And now that male presence is gone, he's feeling alone again. Like that's how he felt in body. This is a perfect example of a spirit that is stuck because his own rage is holding him stuck, his own anger. Because he's so volatile and because there are animals and children, I'm not going to step inside her home. That's not my place. You know, I try to be respectful about that, but I do feel like I'm being okayed to assist here because I feel like the anger is just going to ramp up and could hurt somebody. Okay, usually I invite people in, but I'm going to ask you to not come in with me unless you're already feeling a pull, if you're already feeling a connection. Okay, so he's crying now, which is good. And I always say it's like a metaphorical cry, meaning they're just they've stopped. I was able to sort of stop the rage long enough for him to feel something. He's saying he was really misunderstood, bullied a lot. He struggled with even understanding himself, like who he was, and he just always felt isolated and alone. He felt like nobody cared and nobody listened. So I'm just telling him, I'm not going to say a lot. I'm going to put my hands out and let him express himself. He's just crying, a lot of tears, a lot of releasing so he can move on. Okay, so now I invite anyone who's watching to imagine, feel, see him. You don't need to know who he is or what he looks like, but join me in helping him to look up. And it's a lot of times we just want to pull his shoulders back a bit, lift his chin up. What we're doing is encouraging confidence and calm so that he can feel light and just be lifted up. I feel like he may have been a neighbor to this house. I think he's gone. I heard like this real faint thank you. I think he's okay. So now that activity should stop there. If it doesn't, of course, she can reach out to me. I typically don't like go into someone's home like that and remove, but I was told that it's going to ramp up and there's a baby and animals in there. So, and obviously we don't want her freaked out. So hopefully that does a job. If not, she can reach out and I can make sure to finalize it. Any activity that happens moving forward is not this young man. So this is a perfect example of why I don't just go in and remove energy unless I am instructed, because it is deeply unsafe, like this situation. Because what'll happen is if the person who owns the home isn't aware that I'm doing this, it's interference. And I don't know what the connection is with the homeowner and the spirit, meaning not like, do they know each other? Did they know each other? Meaning there is reasons why a lot of homeowners want to have these spirits there. They don't realize it consciously, but unconsciously there's a reason why. And sometimes there's karmic ties or something with that soul. And so it's not for me to interfere. With this, I was shown a clear way in. What that will mean, though, is there's a void. If this mother or child or these animals are supposed to be having are supposed to be experiencing paranormal activity to help them with their evolution, then something else will come in and that will continue. Okay, but because I am not supposed to intervene, unless Spirit says, it's okay, you can intervene, they will learn another way. So let's see. We'll see if this person responds and or if they need more help. Otherwise, I think we may have resolved it.